process. We've seen when evaluating capacity development assistance that you cannot impose capacity development. If you don't have internal stakeholders that believe in developing these capacities, they will not develop. You will have a consultant who comes in, who will do something, or maybe even a team of consultants, and then they go away and nothing much will stay. So having internal stakeholders who have the commitment to carry something forward is absolutely essential. And that's something which you heard also Dara say yesterday morning. A joint participatory diagnostic. We heard yesterday a couple of people talk about mostly the donors or large agency come in and say, well, we think you need this or you should be doing that. Again, that is not really how it can work. It has to be a process by which people jointly agree what do we need actually to improve, what capacities do we want to achieve, and agree on those outcomes. I understand that sometimes people feel like having an ex-ante position on what you want to achieve at the end is very demanding. It is true, it is a demanding thing to do, but unless you have an agreed target of what you want to achieve, people will not necessarily work in the same direction, not pull in the same direction, not carry the same messages, and so it is important to agree on the outcomes. It's a flexible process approach. The risk in this, presenting this is that some people might say like, oh, okay, fine, we have to do a diagnostic, then we decide what we do, and then we go for it. That's not really how it works. It has to be a constant process of checking and seeing whether what we want to achieve is going to work. It has to use a range of tools. We've heard a number of times training, and training is very often understood as capacity development, whereas training is only one of the parts. I go back actually to, I started 22 years ago designing projects as a junior professional officer, and these were all capacity development projects. And this was for UNIDO, and I was very lucky because UNIDO had evaluated what was then called institutional development, and they had found that obviously training in itself doesn't do anything, and they took it up to the institutional level and set out a framework for what an institution needed to function, and that evolved then into capacity development when people recognized that institutions cannot function in a vacuum. Unfortunately today, still a lot of people say capacity development and mean training, and unless you put training in that broader context, it's going to be very difficult to actually achieve capacity development results. And the final point, and this is again to illustrate how much we as evaluators have in common with the capacity development community, is that they insist on continuous learning from experience. The capacity development process has to have milestones, has to have feedback initiatives to constantly take stock of what is working and what is not working and how to move forward. So talking about these three levels, when we speak of the enabling environment, so that's the context in which we work, commitment to independence is the basis of credibility. So what you would want is that your core stakeholders, especially those who have reservations about evaluation, who are afraid of evaluation, commit to this independence. Is that easy to achieve? Certainly not. I mean, there are societies, there are organizations, there are individuals where criticism is seen as a threat, not as something constructive and helpful to learn and move forward. So it is important to create that commitment. Ideally, you have somebody at a higher level to support it. Sometimes that is not possible, and then you have to figure out other ways of working. Say, for example, the head of the organization really does not appreciate evaluation, even though they have to have it because, the member countries say you have to have that. Then you have to work at other levels to convince a larger group of people to come with you and support it, so that you start working on the corporate culture of learning and accountability. And you can apply that example from an organization also to a country level. In some countries, and we heard a very impressive example of Sri Lanka yesterday, where there is seemingly a very strong commitment to doing this type of work and wanting to do a results-based approach, and I'm sure there are many other examples like that. And equally, as I said, you can apply it at the organizational level. There is something especially in organizations, about the structural independence of evaluation. And those of you who work in evaluation and have faced this situation where somebody comes up and says, I don't like your results, they're too critical, you have to change them. That is something which evaluators have experience, and I think we will continue to experience, because it's just in the nature of the job. And that's why in the profession the structural independence has been very important, and it actually started in the World Bank thanks to Bob Picciotto, who's with us, so maybe you'll talk about that tomorrow. And that also refers to the structural setting of your evaluation capacities. If you talk about the institutional context, if the head of evaluation reports to the same person who's responsible for the program design, obviously you can have a conflict of interest. The head of program design might have a strong interest to say that everything was fine, they did the best they could, whereas the evaluation might need to flag that not everything has worked so well. So that's why moving the evaluators out of that setting is important, reporting to a higher level. And there are different models there. We have somebody from a parliament, so sometimes evaluators report to parliament, sometimes they report to the head of the organization or the governing body of the organization. And then we have the community of practice, and that's sort of very relevant here to ideas. It sets the good practice standards. We can do joint advocacy. What we're trying to do in the UN evaluation group is to form a body of where we stand professionally, and I can assure you that at least I, in my job, do use that when I discuss with my management about the way the evaluation office needs to function. And we can use it for benchmarking. Again, there are a number of organizations who do peer reviews, where we compare ourselves with each other to see how well are we actually doing, and what can we learn from that, and how we can improve our performance. When it comes to institutional capacity, the importance, and I mentioned that a bit earlier, is that if we depend entirely on the structural independence where we report, and then the individual, that they will be doing the best they can, we're leaving them out there without much support, and it will become a matter of the individual's